guys, welcome back to Iron Griffin Studio. Dungeon tiles. They're so boring sometimes, you know, like they're just grey and sometimes a little bit flat and 2D, lifeless, boring. Just, you know, I've seen so many people make them and they're not happy with their result because they just think that maybe it needs more, because they're getting the foam and they're putting the grid lines in, and that should be enough, right? But sometimes it can just make for a bit of a boring setup. It doesn't look very immersive, and maybe it just needs a little bit more. So there are things we can do to make dungeon tiles more interesting and cool, and basic examples are just things like adding moss or adding extra texture effects like big cracks or holes in the floor and things like that. Holes which you can fill with water or kind of goop, slime, blood, murky, weird stuff, acid, whatever. And you can just add things like certain kinds of dried grass looking flock that might look like hay that's been trampled in or whatever. And so yeah, there's plenty of things that we can do that are very flat and that can be added to a dungeon tile that still allow it to be stored and like stacked up on top of each other, because that's the main thing really. You need to be able to store all these tiles. You know, feasibly people are going to be making like 100 of these things, and if they don't store very well, then that's an issue. So you want them to be flat-ish at least. You can maybe have like a millimeter or two of height, protrusion to a dungeon tile, but really it needs to be playable and storable and look good and look realistic, right? So what else can we do? Today I'm going to make some dungeon tiles which are hopefully more interesting and will add a little bit of character to a room or an encounter or whatever. Yeah, hopefully they're going to be cool, and this is just an idea. It's just a video to give you ideas and maybe inspire a few other people to create some interesting designs. If you've got any cool designs, leave it in the comments below and I will probably copy them because yeah, I'm always interested in extra dungeon stuff. So let's get to it and I will crack on. Alrighty, so the first one I'm going to make is going to be a kind of giant iron grate on the floor. The idea is just to cut out the middle section and then replace that with an analogue for an iron grate. I'm going to use granny grating for it, or whatever you call it, some sort of plastic mesh that I found in a hobby store. But I wanted to add a little bit of stonework around the edges, so I just marked that up with a sharpie and cut that out with an X-Acto blade when I knew the exact size I wanted the hole. Now the reason I did this tile in like two slices is because I was cutting through it, but I didn't want to cut all the way through, so I could reattach the other slice to the back of this one. Alright, so I've got a few different designs here. This one I've actually decided not to use because I just didn't like the hole in the floor. I was thinking I was going to fill it with water, but I decided to do a different one. This one is just with a small drain in the middle. I used some granny grating for that. This one has just a broken slab in the middle, so all I did is just cut away some of the tile and push it down kind of to texture, and left a few bits outstanding to act as the broken slab. This one is just simple compass points, just copied off a photograph, and this one here is the giant iron grate on the floor with some granny grating, which is the best thing I've got to use for a giant iron grate. And the best thing about these is they're all storable and they all store flat. Okay, so time for some Mod Podge. So this is just my usual Mod Podge black paint mixture, goes all over the tile. You can leave the back, but I wanted to make sure that I cover the sides and the top, and make sure when you do the granny grating here, granny grating doesn't take any sort of paint or glue very well. I find that it tends to flake off a little bit, but Mod Podge seems to work pretty well in making the paint stick. So definitely worth using Mod Podge black paint acrylic mix. Then we move on to the dry brushing stage. So this is just quickly showing you. It's just the usual dry brushing method that you'd use on any of the dungeon tile. Pretty heavy grey dry brush, and just make sure you pick out all that texture. Once the grey was done, I just wanted to add a little bit of colour variation using some browns, some kind of tans, and some, I think maybe it's burnt sienna or something, maybe. Just a few little spots to make it look a bit less grey and boring. And partway through this project I decided to come up with another idea for a dungeon tile, and I just wanted a 3x3 basic tile to act as base for that one, so I've added that one there. After the iron grate tile had been Mod Podged, I stuck the back to the front, and to get it ready for painting, this would ensure that the area beyond the mesh would stay dark and deep. And now the iron grate. I'm going to use Rhinox hide for the base coat for this, purely because I want to do this rusty, and I find this is the best undercoat or base coat for rust effect. I'm going to use Riser Rust next, using my usual method, where I simply blotch it on in little bits all across the metalwork, and then kind of smooth it out around the edges to kind of blend it into the brown, and that way you don't get any harsh lines of it. Right, time to do some washes, and it's just the usual wash that I would use on any of my dungeon tiles. Simple technique, just kind of stab it into the foam there. You don't want to wipe it on, you want to kind of stipple it on. I think it's probably the best method. That way you don't reactivate the paint underneath. Alright, I painted some kind of dirt colour into the recesses in this piece, and I just want to slightly highlight the parts on the inside and just try and bring them to the surface a little bit, give it a bit of depth, I guess. Now with that piece I added some moss, and I put a bit of water effects in it, but I wasn't really happy with the result, so I'm going to add a little bit more, and I'm going to make it murky. So I'm just going to add a little bit of like my usual wash that I would use into the water effects there, and just want to pour it in. I know I should have used a cup for this, but this is all I had to hand. But it worked pretty well anyway in the end. It's just a matter of filling up the space with the murky water. I'm much happier with this effect, and then you just got to sort of tease it into the corners of where you need it to be. So I just did that with a paintbrush, and I think I used a cocktail stick as well. I just tried to really brush it around and get it into the cracks where water might naturally flow. I'm much happier with this murky kind of dirty water effect. Now for that blank 3x3 square, my idea was to add some posters on the floor, or flyers or whatever. So I printed out some interesting flyers on some kind of dirty parchment paper, and I'm just going to stick them down with a bit of PVA glue. This is a really simple technique just to add a little bit of intrigue to a dungeon tile. And just to finish this piece off, I wanted to add a bit of gold to it, so I wanted some gold coins on the floor. I used a 1mm circular gold glitter for this, and this is available online. I think I got this off eBay or something. It's just a matter of picking a few spots and putting a very tiny amount of PVA on the surface, and then very carefully using a little crafting tool of some description, just place them on. You don't have to paint these if you get them in gold or silver, but I think I did anyway. Alright, now I know we were almost done, but I had another idea and I wanted to make it very quickly, so I made some I made a 3x3 inch square of graphics medium weight chipboard, and I kind of clad the edges in XPS foam and glued them down with hot glue. So I just marked up the edges of the tile, like they would be dungeon tiles. I used an X-Acto knife and then my little beveling tool so that it looks like it would fit in any dungeon terrain. Then I needed to add some texture, so I used the usual aluminium ball technique, covered all the edges, and then I added some PVA to the center. I really wanted to texture the middle of this. I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be, but I decided to make it kind of like a pit of water or something. So I wanted to texture the base with a little bit of standard sort of modelling sand, and then once it was undercoated and mod podged and base coated with grey as usual, I added a few bones of skeleton things in the middle there, and I added some earth colour to the bottom, and then I finished off painting the bones. And now I wanted to put in some water effects. I used some CFS, a 2-part epoxy resin here. I had to do this in 2 pours because I didn't do enough for the first time. I wanted the whole lot to be submerged, and I've used a bit of paint in the mix there as well so that it would make the water nice and murky. And then I used a lighter to pop the surface bubbles very carefully. Alright, so there we go. Yeah, the trick with dungeon tiles seems to be for making them storable. It's just you can't build on them, so you've got to build in them. You've got to kind of put the texture downwards rather than upwards. There's not a lot you can add, but you can take away parts of the tile, but then you risk its rigidity and its durability maybe. there's only so much you can do until it becomes like unstorable, if you like. So hopefully these few little ideas are, you know, somewhat useful to you. Hopefully you can think of some more. If you do, let me know and I might just give them a go as well. But yeah, that's all for this video. I will hopefully get back to you next week with another one. And yeah, if you liked this video, if you found it informative, useful and inspiring, then feel free to like, comment and subscribe and all that other usual stuff. And yeah, I'll be very appreciative. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching and happy crafting.